What do you think? Why did ancient humans invent the wheel so late? What made the wheel different from all the other inventions and discoveries? 40,000 years ago, our ancestors were drawing horses, bison, deer, and other animals on cave walls, and they did it with incredible skill. But that's not all. Around 30,000 years ago, they made flutes out of bone and played music. About 10,000 years ago, they invented agriculture and entered a whole new era. Around 5,500 years ago, they were already sailing across the seas in sailboats. They dug complex irrigation canals and learned how to work with copper and bronze. Metal tools, musical instruments, architecture, trade. We could list many more inventions and achievements, yet there's still no wheel in sight. So why? Was it really harder than building ships and sailing across the ocean? For 200,000 years, humans were doing things that were incredibly smart and astonishing. Didn't the round stones around them, rolling logs, or even the shape of the setting sun ever spark a different idea in their minds? The answer is actually pretty surprising. Talk about the actual evidence. In 2002, near Ljubljana, the capital of Slovenia, archaeologists discovered an incredible historical artifact beneath a marsh, a wooden wheel, perfectly preserved and estimated to be between 5,100 and 5,350 years old. Yes, the wheel we're talking about. But unlike many other inventions, it doesn't seem to have a very deep history. Known as the Ljubljana Marsh Wheel, this find is the oldest wooden wheel ever discovered, and it supports the question we asked earlier. This wheel and axle system dates back to around 3130 BC, and so far the oldest wheel ever found comes from what is now Slovenia. But here's the interesting part. Wheels weren't only appearing in one place at that time, they weren't limited to Slovenia. Around the same period, this invention started showing up in different regions that had no contact with each other, almost as if people suddenly came up with the same idea at the same time. In Mesopotamia, in what is now Iraq, the Sumerians were already using the potter's wheel. A stone potter's wheel found in the city of Ur has been dated to around 3129 BC, while in Slovenia the date is about 3130 BC. Pretty strange coincidence, right? In Poland, archaeologists found the Brnosi's face dated between 3635 and 3370 BC, and what's special about it is that it contains the oldest known drawing of a wheeled vehicle, meaning wheels were already around back then too. Then, in 2024, a fascinating study pushed the possible origin of the wheel even further back. Honestly, this makes things a little easier to understand because having wheels appear in different places at nearly the same time raises a lot of questions. According to the study, copper miners east of the Carpathian Mountains may have invented the wheel around 3900 BC, about 6,000 years ago, based on a simple problem, moving heavy loads through narrow mine tunnels, which may have led them this solution. But the real question is this: who actually invented it? Which people were responsible? The answer is probably nobody or everybody, because archaeological evidence suggests that the wheel may have been developed independently in multiple places, so the mystery isn't solved yet. Now we're getting to the real question. Why wasn't the wheel invented until the Bronze Age? By that point, millions of people had lived and countless civilizations had come and gone. So why wasn't it invented earlier? The answer is even more interesting because inventing the wheel wasn't just about rolling a cylinder and putting something on top of it. The real invention wasn't actually the wheel. It was the axle system. Think about it. To attach a wheel to a vehicle, you need a fixed axle. The two ends of that axle have to be almost perfectly round and smooth. That's the most important requirement. And if it's not met, even modern vehicles wouldn't be able to travel a single meter. The hole in the center of the wheel also has to match the axle perfectly. Not too tight, not too loose. Here's why. If it's too tight, the wheel won't turn. If it's too loose, it'll break. And that's not all. The thickness of the axle is critical too. A thick axle creates so much friction that pulling the load would require not an animal, but practically an army. A thin axle reduces friction, but then it breaks. As anthropologist David Anthony put it, this system was an all-or-nothing kind of engineering. Looking at it with today's technology, he was absolutely right. If even one parameter was wrong, the entire system would fail. Building something this precise required metallurgy. In other words, the ability to make metal tools. You could even argue that before humanity could invent the wheel, it first had to learn how to work metal. Only then could the tools needed to build a wheel exist. Our questions are slowly starting to get answers, but there are still more important ones left. If the wheel depended on the axle, and the axle depended on metalworking, did people really have to wait that long? So what were people doing before then? They moved large stones and logs by placing round logs underneath them and rolling them along. That's how they transported heavy loads. And you'll probably agree, it worked, but it was incredibly difficult and inefficient. That's exactly why the wheel and axle system became such a revolution. It finally solved the massive friction problem that had always made transportation so hard. Today, it seems like an ordinary object, but back then, it was almost a matter of survival. Okay, the wheel was invented, so transportation must have become easy after that. But the truth is, it didn't happen that way at all. That's because the wheel wasn't first used for transportation. It was used for shaping clay. The Sumerians started using a rotating platform while making pottery. The thing we now call the potter's wheel actually comes from that time. They spun the platform to shape wet clay around 3500 BC. So the first real wheel idea appeared in pottery about 300 years before it was used for transport. Pretty strange, isn't it? If you look at the bigger picture, it took 300 years for a spinning platform to become a vehicle that could carry people. Sounds crazy, right? Today you might say, why didn't they think of that sooner? But for people back then, making that mental leap was a huge challenge, and it ended up taking about 300 years. Around 3000 BC, the Sumerians built the first two-wheeled carts. That achievement belongs to them. The wheels were made from solid wooden discs, heavy, clunky wheels carved from a single piece of wood or made by joining several planks together. These carts were pulled by oxen. Then came the next revolution. Around 2000 BC, spoked wheels appeared. Instead of a solid wooden disc, they used a lightweight frame with spokes. That one innovation dramatically reduced the weight of vehicles, and those lighter wheels paved the way for the rise of chariots. Around 1600 BC, the Egyptians developed lightweight chariots with spoked wheels, and those vehicles completely changed the history of warfare. They were incredibly useful both in terms of battlefield tactics and moving large numbers of soldiers. Fast chariots packed with archers could tear through enemy lines. From that point on, wars weren't won only with swords and spears. They were also won with speed and maneuverability. The wheel started out as a potter's tool and ended up becoming the king of the battlefield. The transformation it went through was incredible, and honestly, that was only the beginning. Reached the strangest and most thought-provoking part of this story. In 1880, archaeologist Desiree Charnay excavated the grave of an Aztec child in Mexico. Inside the grave, he found a small dog figurine, and underneath it were 4 tiny wheels. It was basically a toy cart. So clearly, the Aztecs understood the principle of the wheel, but they never used it for transportation. The great Aztec city of Tenochtitlan was built on an island in the middle of a lake. Canals and small boats were actually a much more efficient way to move goods than wheeled vehicles, and in mountainous terrain, wheels weren't very useful anyway. The Inca civilization managed its empire across more than 4,000 kilometers of roads using only animals and human labor, without wheels at all. We talk about animal transportation, but here's the thing. There were no horses, oxen, or buffalo in the Americas. A wheel only becomes truly useful when there's a strong animal to pull it. Llamas were good pack animals, but they simply weren't strong enough to pull carts. The Aztec paradox teaches us something important. Knowing about a technology is not the same as having a reason to use it. Geography, environment, and necessity. These are the things that make an invention useful to a society or not. So, yes, inventions can be made, but only if they fit the world around them. So, where does the legacy of the wheel end, do you think? The answer, nowhere. First, it was the potter's wheel, then a cart wheel, then the water wheel, millstone rope pulley, door hinge, clock gear, steam engine wheel, locomotive, airplane turbine, computer hard drive. Today, every motor spinning in your phone is basically an advanced version of this 1,000-year-old idea. But maybe the most interesting part is this. Planes were inspired by birds. Radar copied bat echolocation. Velcro came from burrs. But when it comes to the wheel, there's no model in nature. No animal uses wheels. No plant has wheels. It's a completely human-made concept. Pretty amazing, right? A small biological note. Some bacteria move by rotating structures called flagella. In a way, this could be considered a kind of biological wheel in evolutionary terms. But when the wheel was invented, no one could have observed them or copied the idea from them, because they're on a scale of a millionth of a millimeter. Difficulties have always pushed humans to find solutions, and that's how inventions were born. We don't know the name of the person or people who invented the wheel. We don't know what language they spoke. But every day, billions of people are paying respect to that nameless genius, or geniuses. And maybe the real lesson is this: sometimes the simplest looking things require the deepest thinking, and they're not as easy as they seem. The wheel went through centuries of development and served humanity all along the way. Thanks for watching.